Good morning and welcome to this Disability Awareness Sunday. Jesus often interacted with and spoke about people who had disabilities. This is important to know because within our society and our churches, there is a significant number of people who have physical, emotional, sensory, or intellectual disabilities. Some disabilities are visible and some are not so easily visible. Many of us will experience a disability at some stage of our lives, particularly as we grow older. I want to look at 3 stories from the Gospels where Jesus interacts with people with disabilities. The first is today's story of the healing of a blind man. John chapter 9 verses 1 to 12. The religious leaders asked Jesus a question. Who sinned, this man or his parents? There was then a commonly held belief that blindness, deafness, paralysis, etc. was as a result of sin or somehow a punishment for the person. While we do not believe this today, the stigma and discrimination against people with disabilities still remains. Jesus answers clearly, neither this man nor his parents sinned. Jesus challenged the attitudes that led to the blaming of people for the disability and the social attitudes that led to their rejection and exclusion from society. May we have that same passionate approach. The second story is about the healing of the paralyzed man. Mark chapter 12 verses 1 to 12. Mark 2, 1 to 12. The friends of the paralyzed man brought him on a mat to Jesus. Jesus was in the house at Capernaum. When they got to the house, they found such a large crowd there that they couldn't enter through the door. So they took him up to the roof, removed part of the roof, and lowered him down to Jesus. People with disabilities face many barriers, but through their determination and with the support of others, they can overcome these barriers. What barriers do we put up in church? Are wheelchair users able to get into our church on their own, for example? Can everyone participate in the service, see what is going on, and hear? Are we using the microphones? Are we loud enough? Let us be also conscious, as I mentioned earlier, of our discriminatory attitudes towards people, which can also be a barrier to keep them from coming closer and being included. The final story is the parable of the banquet, Luke 14:12 to 24. It's about a story of someone holding a big dinner and he invites various guests. But the guests, one after the other, give various excuses. One has bought some land and needs to go and see it. Another has bought some oxen and needs to try them out. And the other has recently got married. Following Jesus' advice, which he gives earlier, the host says to his servant, "Go into the streets and the lanes of the town and bring those who are poor and maimed and blind and lame." The servant does this and comes back and says, "There is still room." This is a wonderful story of hospitality, of welcoming and valuing of people with disabilities. Those on the outside, on the outskirts of society, are brought in to enjoy the feast. Today, people with disabilities are still often on the outside, perhaps isolated, but they are also among us. Some have been ignored or left out. May they be invited to share in the life, leadership, and mission of our church. Let us celebrate difference, accepting one another's abilities, that each person may reach their God-given full potential. Amen.